Let's take you through a few of the blocks on the Cross Body Pack. Let's start off by making the shoulder strap. We're going to put down the placement line, lay some bag stiffener and some batting on together, stitch around the outside edge, and then we'll remove from the hoop and trim back 1 to 2 millimeters away from our perimeter stitching. Let's add our next piece of fabric, which is our top fabric. We're just using some uncorked cork. This is quite a thin cork. We're going to place some quilting, just simple chevron quilting, onto these pieces for this pack, just so as that you can allow the fabric to do the talking with this design. And we're going to now add some placement basting stitches at both ends, and this is for us to actually place our next piece of fabric, which is going to create a tunnel for our strap to go through. We've made this up already, and we just sit that between our two placement lines, not on top of it, just centralize it between the top and bottom placement lines. Then we're going to do our final row of stitching around the outside edge of this, which will actually attach our back. Now, the back that we've used on this strap can be fabric, it could be cork. We've decided to use a layer of fleece and a layer of mesh, and you'll see this in a second. So the layer of fleece sits under the layer of mesh. That just creates a little bit of grip to your garments or shoulder or what have you, to stop the pack from moving around. Now the grip is just very, very light, of course. You could just use self fabric or another layer of cork, whatever you have at hand. Now we're rough cutting this around the edge, just 1/4 of an inch away from our stitching, leaving a 1/2 inch at the top square edge. We're going to re-trim this before we put our self-made binding. This is store-bought binding, so we're going to trim that back. Now our next piece is the first piece of the backpack, front or back, which has 3 sections: a top, a middle, and a bottom piece. All it is the stabilizer and bag stiffener. Again, I've used that, the bag stiffener, just to give the backpack a bit more body, or the Cross Body Pack a bit more body. I'm trimming this off together. Just make sure that it sits within that seam, and then we're going to place a piece of, well, I'm using cork again, and we'll stitch this around the outside edge, and then we'll add in our chevron quilting. Very simple triple stitch, nice contrasting colour, very easy to do, very quick. So we're going to remove this. Now along the straight edge, just taking my excess staple off, along the straight edge, 1/2 inch. Now let's turn this over, and around the curved edge we want 1/2 inch, but I like to mark it with a ruler and pencil or pen, just so as that it's nice and even, so when we come to sew it to our side gusset, it's easy to do. You don't have to be fastidious about this, but a guide is good. Okay, so that's our top section, our middle section, our low, and our bottom section. So we have these 3 sections create the front, and then we do another 3 to create the back. Now we're going to do our top zip opening. So this will be part of the perimeter gusset section. So we have 4 sections that make up the outside round edge of the back, the crossbody pack. We have a top zip section, we have 2 plain sections along the sides, then we have a base section. We're just going to show you the top zips. The other ones are just the same as making the cork piece which we've just made, just different shapes. So with this, we've actually done our placement lines. We've put our zip in between our placement lines, and we are stitching either way up on either side of the zip. Now, I was a little bit worried that we were going to actually stitch over the top of that zip puller, but we didn't. Just be aware where they are. We're placing our first piece of our flip and fold. It's about 1/4 of an inch past our stitching, or 1/4 of an inch down from our edge of our zip. On the front we place it, and on the back we place a piece of lining in the same position, and we're going to stitch it all in one go. And this is going to basically face out the zip. So these 2 pieces of fabric which we've just stitched through, let's take off our washi tape, finger press it so as it sits down, and then tape it. So it's these 2 pieces of fabric are going to be sandwiching our zip. Okay, we're going to return the hoop to the machine and do the other side exactly the same way. 1/4 of an inch past the edge of the zip, and we're going to flip the hoop over, put the lining on the back, same way, stitch that seam, then we've again opened those pieces of fabric out, and we're just going to stitch the perimeter stitching of our top zip panel. And what didn't I do? I didn't ensure that the zip is sitting down into the body of the work. But I'll show you how we can fix that. That's quite easy. See, I've stitched over the top of that, so it's top stitch the zip as well. I'm just going to cut a couple of those top stitches and pull my zip down. Put a piece of tape across the top of there, just to ensure the zip doesn't fall off. And trim back all seams back to 1/2 inch. Now when you've got a zip puller, sometimes you only can do a potential or part of the seam before having to run the zip down. Otherwise the zip puller sits underneath the ruler and doesn't allow a very good cut. So there we go. Now, see on the back, I have not used tearaway, I have used cutaway. And all I'm going to do is just cut my cutaway away from the back of that zip. And I do that because I don't want the tearaway to be floating inside my bag when it's made. Now we're going to do this is the middle section on the outside pocket. So this has got a contrast stripe down the middle of this outside. This outside pocket is slightly bigger in its width, so as it stands away from the pack, just so it looks like it's got a little bit of dimension. So we've put our stabilizer down, our batting, and our bag stiffener. You don't have to use bag stiffener for this one, this outside panel. And we've done our placement line for our piece of fabric. Now this has got a pattern on it, this piece of fabric, so I like to find out where my middle of my pattern is and line it up with the middle of my placement, just to make sure that it is sitting all correctly. So it's flip and fold. It's very, very easy. Um, it's a very, very easy thing to do this, and it's got the same stitching on the quilting, like which is chevron stitching. It's exactly the same as the other pieces, and instead of going outside around my curve, we're going an inside curve, and I've marked my 1/2 inch there just to give you a guideline to make sure your seam allowances are even. Okay, so there's a middle panel. The top panel was done exactly the same way, but we're just going to do the lower panel. The lower panel has a pocket in it. So this pocket has a zipper in it. It's very simple. It's very similar to one of the pockets we did on the Lemon Lane bag set. That's not often that we do steps in our batting. So we trim away our batting 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching line. Now we're going to lay down the placement lines for our zip. So we're going to put our zip with our zip puller at the top. For those of you that haven't realised this there, but most of you will have because you are women, is that when a zip is closed, it is usually on the left-hand side of the bag when you're staring at it. I didn't realise that for a long time, and I used to just do it whatever. So that's the correct way. It needs to be over there, and I've got that zip puller taped down. Now, before we go too much further, again, I've used cutaway. Now, some of you probably won't like that. Some of you will probably say, I prefer to use tearaway. That's absolutely fine. Go for it. Not a problem. I like using cutaway and trimming the way of my window behind my zip. That's just the way I work. But it is not right and it's not wrong. So we want to put our piece of lining on the back of the hoop. It sits 1/4 inch past our zip cut. And we need to actually fold it over from the back so as it sits and gets caught along the edge of our stabilizer, so it doesn't wander away and get caught underneath the foot, because the lining needs to stay in that position for a little while, because we've got to do a few different things to it. So now we're going to put a placement line for our central panel of our contrast fabric. See, I've got a little tuck in the zip. I'll just give that a little snip, that stitch, and push that down. And we're going to lay a piece of fabric down. And if you've got a pattern, make sure the pattern's central. I've just trimmed my seams back a little bit. So make sure we've got enough fabric for our flip and fold there. So we've got a 1/4 inch seam. So it will be that edge of that fabric that's 1/4 inch past our trim. And then let's put the other side of our flip and fold on. So now we're going to do our quilting, our chevron quilting. Now all the quilting through the panels match, so when we sew those seams together, there are lines that are going to have to look like they're continuous, even though they go through a seam. So we've planned all that, but it's just a word of advice that the chevron quilting will match. We want to just trim these pieces back to 1/4 inch. Then we're going to bring our lining down, tape it into place. And we're stitching our lining down on the back, so it's not going to go anywhere. Okay, so that's stitched. trim that top edge on the zip tape back so as it's 1 to 2 millimeters away from the stitching, and we're going to satin stitch that top edge. We've got 2 more flip and folds to do on the outside edges of this circular piece, but we need to do that once we've got our back pocket on. So this piece of pocketing needs to cover all our rows of stitching on the outside perimeter. Just make sure it's well fixed and it won't move. And we're just going to sew that back pocket into place again. And if I had a brain cell, I would have actually brought my zip runner down so it wasn't out there. There we go. So I'm going to bring that down because it needs to be in the middle of our work. Pop a piece of tape there. I'm just going to go back a few stitches and just secure that. Yeah, there we go. Right, so that's secured our piece of lining on the back as well. Trim our ends of our zip tape back to 1 to 2 millimeters, or as close as you can get. And then we're going to do our side edges of our final flip and fold. Needs to be up at least half an inch above our zip tape on our right hand side there, so it needs to sit there. Give us our final part of our curve. And then we just need to do our final piece by adding the top of the above the zip area, just a strip. Just watch where your zip runner is because you don't want to run over it. And open that out, and then it's going to, I just finger press that just so as it stays flat. Now it's going to do the outside border, and then it's going to do just a triple stitch up along the edge. A lovely neat little pocket. Again, we're going to take it out, trim off the top square edge. There's no sense that you don't have to trim all your linings back. I mean, it says we're going to be trimming this up, so don't panic about that. So half an inch at the top because it's a straight line. Okay. And then, let's across the bottom of there just to get that straight. Then we need to have half an inch. Now, because our stitching isn't curved and going all the way through from there, we just have to eyeball that slightly. So from the right side, I will just to that curve up.